Hey guys, it's Tekosaur, and today we are continuing a topic we started in the previous video for the Ally X. In case you missed that one, let me quickly fill you in. Last time, we tightened the memory timings, which can play a significant role in improving performance, especially in cases where faster memory operations and lower latency are important. Now, this process does require a lot of trial and error and a whole bunch of stability testing, because even the smallest mistake with even one memory timing can lead to instability, and instead of boosting performance, it can actually worsen it because of memory related errors fixing process that CPU and Windows will have to do dynamically while it's occurring. So even if it boosts normally to Windows, we still need to thoroughly stress test the whole system. In the previous video, I showed you the exact process I followed, including the values I'm still using after around a month so far. They've been working perfectly for me no matter what I run, with the latest BIOS version as of now 308. But today, we are not just focusing on memory timings per se. Instead, we'll dive into maximizing the TDP, increasing it from the default 30 watt all the way to 50 watt. And we're not talking about just short power bursts at 50 watt. We are aiming for sustained 50 watt gaming, so it will run at the same power limit the entire time without reverting back to the default one. I've shown you previously how I did it on the Ally OG and the Legion Go a few months ago, but this time we are going to combine it with those memory timings on the Ally X and check out the performance gains we can get from both tweaks combined. So with that being said, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to install the Smokeless tool onto a USB drive. Make sure you format the drive to FAT32 and copy all the contents to it. Now while the Ally X is booting, press the volume up button to enter the BIOS menu. Once you are in, press the Y button to switch to the advanced mode. From there, head to the boot section, change boot option 1 from Windows to the USB drive that has the Smokeless tool. Next, go to Security tab and disable Secure Boot. Finally, save changes and exit. Now it should boot directly into the tool. In my current setup, I didn't use a dock station this time. I just plugged in a USB drive with a Smokeless tool in it, and once it's loaded, I removed the flash drive, and everything still works fine. So once it has been loaded, you can take off the drive normally. Now the reason I did this because we'll need to connect a keyboard to navigate through the tool. So I swapped out the USB drive for the keyboard wireless dongle. I know we have 2 ports on the Ally X, but if you are like me, using a USB Type-A to Type-C converter, you will have an issue plugging in 2 things at the same time due to the size of the adapter overtaking the other port. Anyway, once you are in the tool, navigate through Device Manager, AMD CBS. From there, under UMC Common Options and LPDDR Options, you will find the memory timings, which are currently set for me in the same way we left it from the last video. We are using the maximum data clock speed of the Ally X at 7500 MTS, with both SPD and non-SPD timings tightened to the maximum that I could do for this Micron memory model. But for today's topic, we'll focus on the power limit. So go back and here in the SMU Common Options, where we'll find all the power related configurations. To set a maximum of 50 watt TDP, here is what we'll need to do in BIOS. Under System Configuration, set the maximum TDP to 54 watt. Then go to SPL Control, switch it from auto to manual, and set the sustained power limit to 50,000, which equates to 50 watt. If you want to set it to 45 watt, set it to 45,000, or for the case of 40 watt, to 40,000. Be careful though, don't set it here to 50 or 45 because it won't work that way. Values set in here are in milliwatt. Next, set PBT control from auto to manual. This will unlock limits for fast, slow, and time constants for PBT. Set all of these to 50,000 for a 50 watt configuration. Then go to StatPM control, set it to manual, and disable system temperature tracking by toggling it to 0. After that, enable both StatPM and StatPM boost override by setting them to 1. Also set the T-scan time constant for StatPM to almost infinite seconds as I did here. For thermal control, you can change the TJ max from the default 95C to either a higher or lower value. I set it to 105 degrees, but don't worry, temps won't even get close to that. Probably not even over its 95 maximum temp limit. So it's not really that necessary to change it, just to ensure that it doesn't throttle and lowers the TDP. Finally, head down to Smart Shift Control, switch it to Manual, and enable Smart Shift, and set all of the APU's limits to 50,000 to locate in that 50-watt limit. And that's it. Go all the way back. When asked to save changes, press Y on the keyboard, and the changes should now be applied. Head back to the BIOS and revert the boot option to Windows. Don't forget to re-enable Secure Boot as well. Also remember that if you reset the BIOS settings or install a new BIOS version, all these tweaks will be wiped out, including the memory timings. So any changes you make using the Smokeless tool will be erased upon a BIOS reset, new BIOS installation, or reflashing BIOS. Alright, let's now head back to Windows. The great thing about this higher TDP tweak is that you don't need to uninstall or disable Armory Crate. I still have mine set to manual power profile with all power limits at 30 watt and fan speed controlled from here and set to maximum. I also have GPU VRAM to 8G and CPU boost on. My GPU driver is the latest from ASUS as of the date of this video. I also have disabled AMD AFMF and all other Radeon GPU features. Now even though we've set the TDP to 50 watt in the BIOS, we still need to configure it within Windows as well. For that I use a free tool called Universal x86 tuning utility, especially made for Ryzen-based CPUs. It's super simple to use. Once installed, go to Custom Panel. For APU temperature tuning, set it to match the value we've set in the BIOS. In APU power tuning, you will see familiar settings, TAPM power limit, low and fast limits. Set all of them to 50 watt, just like we did in BIOS. You can also save your custom power preset here. Once that's done, hit the apply and you are all set. This will ensure you are running a constant 50 watt without ever reverting back to 30 watt by itself. It's fully tested for hours, and if you set it to 50 watt in BIOS, you can still configure it to lower than this in OS, like to 35 watt. Like what I did is setting it to 50 watt in BIOS and doing the configuration for TDP for benchmarks through this tool in Windows. And speaking of benchmarks, I have prepared 7 games, and I'm especially excited to include Counter-Strike 2 for the first time, thanks to finding a great benchmarking map on Steam. A big shout out to the creators of it. So I benchmarked them all at 900p with the graphics settings on low. And our first game is Cyberpunk 2077. At 30 watt with default timings, we've got an average of 51.1 FPS, and with the Titan timings, that edged up slightly to 51.4. Not a huge difference obviously, but when we push the TDP to 50 watt, we see around a 4 FPS increase, hitting max of 55 with the Titan timings. So we are seeing roughly a 1 FPS increase on average for every 5 watt boost at this specific game. Next is Horizon Zero Dawn. In this one, going from 30 watt to 50 watt, we see about a 3 FPS increase, which isn't groundbreaking. So just like Cyberpunk, where whether we use the default or Titan timings, it isn't that different. And this trend continues in our third game, Red Dead Redemption 2 as well. Performance improvement is similarly modest, but here is where things get interesting. In Forza Motorsport, we see a more significant difference. Check this out. At low 900p, the default higher TDP setups are getting a decent pump, but the Titan timings at lower TDPs are outperforming the default higher TDP ones. For instance, a Titan timings of 35 watt outperforms a default 50 watt. So this is a game we can call that really benefits from both the memory timings tweak and the higher TDP on the Ally X. At 50 watt with Titan timings, we hit 59 FPS on average, so 6 more than the tight 30 watt. A solid improvement combining both. Moving on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we are back to seeing minimal improvement yet again, with just a 4 FPS increase from 30 watt, 50 watt, whether it's default or tight timings. In the Callisto Protocol, it's a similar story. At 50 watt, we got about a 5 FPS increase, and here interestingly, the tight timings didn't lead. And finally, here it comes. I tested Counter-Strike 2 using this benchmark map. While the game generally doesn't allow you to show performance overlay, but I managed to capture FPS at least. At default 30 watt, we see 146 average FPS, while tight timings at 30 watt jump to 154. A hefty 8 FPS improvement. In fact, the Titan timings at 30 watt setup outperformed even the default 45 watt, and at 50 watt with tight memory timings, we reached 157.9 on average FPS. So from tight 30 watt to tight 50 watt, we gained around 4 FPS in this game, and from default 30 watt to tight memory timings at 50 watt, around 12 FPS in this configuration. So we can understand from this that raising maximum TDP will give surely but modest gain, but the tightened memory timings is more of a hit or miss, but once it hit, it makes a noticeable impact. To wrap it all up, I also ran the 3D Mark Steel Nomad Lite benchmark across all those setups. At 30 watt, we gained about 50 points from default to tight timings. At 35 watt, it halved to about 25 points, and at 40 watt, it dropped to just 1. So basically margin of error territory. The same goes for 45 watt. At 50 watt, we see a 10-point difference. So to me, it's clear that at certain occasions, other factors are capping the performance gains made from tightening the memory timings. Still, in lower TDP scenarios like 30 watt and 35 watt, we saw some solid improvement in some cases. Now before we wrap things up, it's important to mention that I wanted to show you more benchmarks so you can understand that while memory timing tweak may not always bring huge performance uplifts, it definitely helps at certain times, especially when combined with other tweaks as well. In this case, adding the higher TDP one gives us a small but noticeable bump. The key takeaway here is that the more tweaks we apply, the more they add up, and eventually they lead to more felt improvement in performance. I'm fully committed to this, and I'll keep looking for ways we can tweak and refine things to push the performance even further. Little by little, we'll get the ultimate experience possible on the Ally X. So I hope you join me on this journey by subscribing to the channel, and support by commenting, liking, whatever helps is very appreciated. At the end of the day, running the Ally X at 50 watt with tight memory timings is a no-brainer for max performance. But is it sustainable for the long-term use? Even if games never got over 90s at 50 watt, I don't think it's a good idea to keep it always this way. I'll say 40 watt is a safer zone and gives you most of the performance boost without pushing the limits too much. Even 35 watt might be enough if you prefer to lower fan speed, and adding up the tight memory timings with them, you could see some performance improvement over the default. So for those of you who asked me to benchmark the memory timings at 50 watt, there you have it. I hope this video answered your question. If you are interested in doing the memory timings tweak, make sure to check out the recommended video here that explains way more things about it. And if you want to set your Ally X to over 30 watt TDP, start with the BIOS, then follow the steps in this video to configure it in the OS as well. As always, if you have any questions or run into any issue, feel free to drop a comment below or chat over at TechOsaur Discord server. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Peace out.